All right, one more. And this is really the essence of what I'm saying, because this is Ask a Neo-Swedenborgian, and the question is, what happens when you die? What happens when I'm going to die? And as I've said, Neo-Swedenborgian is not a faith-driven philosophy. It is a data-driven philosophy. And what's the data? The data is this information we have from these near-death experiences where a person's heart has stopped, they're resuscitated, and they come back and tell a story. So that's the nearest we can get to what it's like to die. You could argue they're not really dead since they're back here talking, and that's fine. Well, this is the nearest we can get to finding out what it's like to die. So we have this data, people whose hearts stopped, they're resuscitated, they come back and they tell a story. And so what it's like to die, if you're drawing from this data, you have the conclusion that about 80% of the time, nothing happens. It's oblivion. You just close your eyes and you cease to exist. This is what the data is telling us, because about 80% of the time, the cardiac arrest people come back and they say, what did you experience in that 30 seconds your heart was stopped? And they say, nothing. I just closed my eyes and then I woke up later in the hospital. They don't have anything to say. So, what's it like to die? Well, 80% of the time, 80 people out of 100 just close their eyes and experience oblivion. Nothing. Okay? About 10% of the time, there's this kind of nebulous, hard to describe experience. Okay? And about 10% of the time, there's this typical near-death experience where the tunnel of light, you go down a tunnel of light and grandma's waiting there and Fluffy, your dog, is waiting there, and you've tore around this city of heaven. So that's like 10% of the time. So 80% of the time is oblivion. There's nothing to talk about. 10% of the time is this kind of weird nebulous thing. That's just use your imagination. There's no consistency. There's nothing really to talk about there either. The 10% of the time, there's a consistent thing with the flowers and the city and the light that loves you and the deceased relatives and all that. So that's what we're talking about. So really, concerning this 80% of the time, which is this oblivion, I think the reaction to that would be to become a stoic, to take it stoically and to think about that and to become a stoic. But you can't really talk about being a stoic, because to be stoic is to not talk much. So you just think about it and you consider that this just might be your life. You're just going to die whenever you die and you're going to cease to exist. That is a distinct possibility. That happens 80% of the time. 10% of the time, some kind of nebulous, use your imagination. Think about that for yourself. There's no patterns for us to talk about. So use your imagination. So you can become a stoic, you can use your imagination, but now we have this other 10% of the time, which is what we're talking about, where there's these consistent patterns that, in a very curious way, align with these books from the spiritualist tradition. So what's it like to die? Well, for 80% of people, it's oblivion. For 10% of the people, some weird nebulous thing happens. For another 10% of the people, they achieve this state of mind which is hyper real, and they know that it's real. And so I'm using this word to know in two different ways, because in the first person subjective sense, they know it's real. That's not what I'm saying. When I say I know it's real, I'm saying that I know that this data is consistent. I know that 10% of the time this is going to happen because it's been predicted and repeated and observed. That part is observable. Of course, the subjective experience is not observable, but what is observable is the consistency in the data that these people come back and they say, I know. So here's the thing. I know that 10% of the people are going to say that they know. That's what it's like to die.